Why are middle-aged men missing from the labor market? For the past 5 months, Paul Rizzo, 38, has been delivering food and groceries through the DoorDash app, but he spent the first half of 2022 earning no paycheck at all, reflecting a surprising trend among middle-aged men. After learning last Christmas that his job as an analyst at a hospital company was being automated, Rizzo chose to stay at home to care for his two young sons. His wife wanted to go back to work, and he was discouraged in his own career after more than a decade of corporate tumult and repeated disappointment. He thought he might be able to earn enough income on his investments to pull it off financially. Rizzo's decision to step away from employment during his prime working years hints at one of the biggest surprises in today's job market. Hundreds of thousands of men in their late 30s and early 40s stopped working during the pandemic and have lingered on the labor market sideline since. While Rizzo has recently returned to earning money, many men in his age seem to be staying out of the workforce altogether. They are an anomaly, as employment rates have rebounded more fully for women of the same age and for both younger and older men. About 89.7% of men ages 35 to 44 were working or looking for work as of November, down from 90.9% before the pandemic. The group's employment rate showed signs of rebounding last month, but has been unusually depressed on average over the past year. The decline in labor force participation among middle-aged men has spanned racial groups, but it has been most heavily concentrated among men who, like Rizzo, do not have a 4-year college degree. The pullback comes despite the fact that wages are rising and job openings are plentiful, including the fields like truck driving and construction, where college degrees are not required and men tend to dominate. Economists have not determined any single factor that is keeping men from returning to work. Instead, they attribute the trend to a cocktail of changing social norms around parenthood and marriage, shifting opportunities, and lingering scars of the 2008 to 2009 downturn, which cost many people in that age group jobs just as they were starting their careers. Now all of a sudden you're kind of getting your life together, and if you're in the wrong industry, Rizzo said, trailing off as he discussed his recent labor market experience. I wasn't the only one who dropped out, I can tell you that. Men have been withdrawing from the labor force for decades. In the years following the World War II, more than 97% of men in their prime working years, defined by economists as ages 25 to 54, were working or actively looking for work, according to the federal data. But starting in the 1960s, that share began to fall, mirroring the decline in domestic manufacturing jobs. What is new is a small demographic slice. Men who were early in their careers during the 2008 recession seems to be most heavily affected. I think there's a lot of very discouraged people out there, said Jane Oates, a former Labor Department official who now heads Working Nation, a nonprofit focused on workforce development. Men lost jobs in astonishing numbers during the 2008 financial crisis as the construction and home building industries contracted. It took years to regain that ground for men who were then in their 20s and early 30s and just getting started in their careers. Employment rates never fully recovered. Economists came up with a range of explanations for the men's slow return to the labor force. After the war on crime of the 1980s and 1990s, more men had criminal records that made it difficult to land jobs. The rise of opioid addiction had sidelined others. Video games had improved in quality, so staying home might have become more attractive. And the decline of the nuclear family units may have diminished the traditional male role as the economic provider. Now, recent history appears to be repeating itself, but for one specific age group. The question is why 35 to 44-year-old men seem to be staying out of work and job searches more than other demographics. Patricia Blumenauer, Vice President of Data and Operations at Philadelphia Works, a workforce development agency, said she had observed a dip in the number of men in that age range coming in for services. A disproportionately high share of those who do come in leave without taking a job. Blumenauer said that age range is a group that we're not seeing show up. She thinks some men who lost their blue-collar jobs early in the pandemic might be looking for something with flexibility and higher pay. The ability to work from home 3 days a week or have a 4-day weekend, things that other jobs have figured out, aren't possible for those types of occupations. When men don't find those flexible jobs or can't compete for them, they might choose to make ends meet by staying with relatives or doing something under the table for work, Blumenauer said. The pandemic has probably also slowed America's already weak family formation, giving single or childless men less of an incentive to settle into steady jobs, said economist Ariel Blinder. On the flip side, disruptions to schooling and childcare meant that some men who already had families may have stopped doing paid work to take on more household tasks. A growing number of men do seem to be taking on more childcare duties, time use and other survey data suggest. But a shift towards being stay-at-home dads is unlikely to be the full story. Employment trends look the same for men in the age group who report having young kids living with them and those who don't. What clearly does matter is education. The participation decline is more heavily concentrated among people who have not graduated from college, based on detailed government survey data. Some economists speculate that the disproportionate decline could be because the age group has been buffeted by repeated crises, making their labor market footing fragile. They lost work early in their careers in 2008, faced a slow recovery after, and found their jobs at risk again amid 2020 layoffs and ongoing shifts towards automation. This group has been hit by globalization, said David Dorn, a Swiss economist who studies labor markets. Rizzo turned to DoorDash, earning his first paycheck July 4th. While he is technically back in the labor market, gig work like this isn't well measured in jobs data. If many men are taking a similar path but do not work every week, they might be overlooked in surveys, which ask if someone worked for pay in the previous week to determine whether they were employed. Rizzo is waiting to see what happens to his DoorDash income in an economic pullback before he rules out corporate work forever. Already other Dashers are complaining the business is slowing as people have spent down pandemic savings. That fragility theory makes sense to Rizzo. He had seen the Navy as his ticket out of poverty in Louisiana and had expected to have a career in the service until he broke his back during basic training. He retired from the military after a few years, then he pivoted, earning a 2-year degree in Georgia and beginning a bachelor's degree at Arizona State University, with dreams of one day working to cure cancer. Then the Great Recession hit. Rizzo had been working nights in a laboratory to afford rent and tuition, but the job ended abruptly in 2009. Phoenix was ground zero for the financial implosion's fallout. Frantic job applications yielded nothing, and Rizzo had to drop out of school. Worse, he found himself staring down imminent homelessness. His tax refund saved him by allowing him and his wife to move back to Louisiana, where jobs were more plentiful. But after their divorce, he had hit his low point. I had nothing to show for my life after my 20s, he explained. Rizzo spent the next decade rebuilding. He worked his way through various corporate positions where he taught himself skills in Excel and Microsoft SharePoint. Married again, had 2 sons, and bought a house. Yet he was regularly at risk of losing work to downsizing or technology. Including late last year, the company he worked for wanted to move into a new role, perhaps as a traveling salesperson when his desk job disappeared. But his sons have special needs, and that was not an option. He quit in January. He watched the kids, posted on his investments related YouTube channel, and watched Netflix. He thought he might be able to live on military payments and dividend income, becoming part of the financially independent retire early or FIRE trend. But then the Federal Reserve raised interest rates and markets gyrated. I got FIRE, all right, he said. My portfolios got set on fire. And that's it.